Gentlemen, you are both drunk on cosmic wine.
Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Mark Sylvester.
And I'm Dr. Richard Schulman. This is Alt Psych.
Welcome again to the show, Dr. Sean Paul, our guest co-host, expert extraordinaire, maybe expert in interest, because we got an interesting topic today, right?
I would agree. Yes, I don't purport to be an expert on this topic, but I think it's fascinating, and I started to dig into it.
Well, we're all about to be an expert, but the topic of the day is the Akashic records. What are they? What do they mean? What do they do? Why do people believe this? And who the hell cares? That's basically the outline, the summary of it. And it's a really, it's an interesting topic. It's one we kind of have touched on before. We've given it lip service. We've kind of done it through the lens, I think, of transcendental meditation. But I just wanted to, bounce the proverbial ball of yarn around with you about it in a bigger sense, in people's conceptualization of it, understanding of it. I think the whole concept of the Akashic records mirrors other spiritual beliefs, whether it's the American Book of the Dead, Tibetan Book of the Dead, Bardo plane, or even a Christian model. To me, it's a different flavor of understanding our consciousness's place in the continuum, in the universe, and in this plane of existence and beyond. So I tend to think of it more like a collective unconscious in a Jungian sense in that regard.
Right. I think that's our way of conceptualizing in the Western sense, right? We've come to this, we use different language, a different cultural framework, but I think it does dovetail quite well with all thoughts that have ever been thought, all the energy, all of the, knowledge of existence being sort of boundless, put into this concept. And every major faith, has wrote on this. We call it different things, just like people call God different things. And we conceptualize it differently, and we understand and accept it in the Western sense. And as students of psychology, psychiatrists, we're very much in tuned that there is this energy, this does exist, but beyond what that is wasn't a part of my training, wasn't a part of most psychiatrists or psychologists training, is to dig in to what that really looks like. And so this is like an explanatory model of that.
Yeah, it's really kind of just a general oversight explanatory model. But what's interesting about it is how it does tie in various fields of spirituality and modern physics and transcendentalism that, resonate in a lot of ways with me, but a lot of people. But like the Jungian concept of the collective unconscious is another perfect example. This is sort of more of like a detailed map of maybe how the collective unconscious works. And the general fallacy of humans is to assume that our brain is powerful enough to understand things, right? And we don't like to admit the things that we don't understand. However, if we step back a little bit, we could look at distances in space, for instance, or numbers of galaxies and stars and planets and all that. That's a size and scale of a grandeur and precision and organization that's so impossibly complex. Our little pea-sized brain hasn't come close to even conceptualizing that. So I think people get more they get comfortable with the uncomfortableness of not being able to wrap their mind around very difficult concepts. And to some degree, I would say this applies here. I don't like to give that disclaimer like, well, hey, this is complicated, so you're probably not going to understand it. Because I don't think that's our job, I guess, is to make it accessible so people can understand it.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the explanation of the Akashic record is it does put it into a wavelength that we can see, right? To help us understand this, here's a contradictory statement, the understandable, the sort of Moebius band that wraps in on itself, and which way is up, which way is down, I don't know. But that's the beauty of this. And there is some intuitiveness to the concept.
Yeah, I think it resonates with a lot of people if they do understand it. And the problem with the Akashic records is it's either like people they may not have even heard of it, but if they do, they may not understand much more than just a basic surface. So this isn't like an advanced primer, or we can talk about the multidimensionality of it, but we purposely left that out because it is very it's a little bit too in-depth for this video. And I think it distracts from understanding the bigger picture. So, and I guess in a similar vein is realizing your brain has limitations and understanding distances in space, or the age of the universe, or how many billions of people are on the planet, and trying to absorb all of their problems. In a similar vein, the Akashic record is thought of a indelible mark or library or recording, or dare I say database, of literally every thought that every person, every sentient being in this universe has ever had and will ever have. So that's kind of the first leap to get over, I think, for people. It's because we're linear beings, we understand linear time, and the Akashic records definitely exist out of that space. And some people call it source, some people call it the name of their supreme deity, the mind of God, whatever. But it's definitely conceptually, I think you can understand, okay, every thought that ever was, every probability, but to try to wrap your brain around that, wow, it's a lot of record keeping, it seems like.
Right. Where do they write this all down?
But
we're stepping into the woo here, as they say, and I think it's pretty cool too. I mean, I did read a couple articles we're not going to talk about by a Hungarian scientist, Irvin Laszlo, who's written a couple of books on this. But there is actually a quantum way of explaining this exact concept, in physics. Because you think about the Big Bang, you think about everything coming from nothing, originating in one singularity, and then expanding out, forever. So it's really fascinating to me how people have conceptualized this since, I don't know, 10, 20,000 years ago, maybe, right? For written records of the Akashic, Akashic thinking, Akashic levels. And now we're putting words on it, and we're putting our framework from a Western scientific way on something that is still extremely in a sense spiritual, but that's kind of what particle physics boils down to, right? I mean, not particle physics, but quantum physics, right, Mark?
Yeah, the quantum reality and kind of this super string connection between thought and matter, the interaction or the actual birth of matter from consciousness, which a lot of people ultimately believe is what put into motion the Big Bang, which is the assumed beginning of this particular universe. But the kind of consensus in modern physics is there is no evidence to argue against the idea of a multiverse, basically not only other parallel universes, but literally an infinite number of them, just like that overwhelming thought of all thoughts and are stored in this place. It's not really a place that you can go to. It's more like, following tracks in a forest. They're laid down and they stay there. And if they're big enough, they get noticed, and they get, there are areas that people cut trails and so on and so forth. But the critical reason to understand all of this is really so people can discover, awaken to the fact that their current vibration, their frequency, their energy, we'll talk about that a little bit more, essentially is what manifests reality. and kind of like the book The Secret, for people who are old enough to have read that thoughts directly relate to outcomes and manifest our reality. The problem is it's not so instantaneous that our brain can see it like an immediate cause and effect.
Right. I think it's that book is a beautiful concept. I would love for that to be so accessible for everyone. But it is essentially the same concept. Like I was thinking about this earlier. I've read the book, been a long time, but there's a lot of people who got extremely obsessed with this book, not understanding the complexity of it, really more on the Akashic level of what it takes to get there. And will every being on this planet be able to get there, human being be able to get there in their lifetime to access it, and how much of it can they access? And so how do you develop that energy level, like you're saying, that vibratory level as they speak of it, to be able to do it and understand it?
Yeah, and part of, arguably, if this is the accurate paradigm, arguably the blinding of ourselves in entering this lifetime and the soul contract and some of the other things we've talked about on the show before is really important, is really what governs our high points or our mission or our goals or the outline of our life. So we have been born into and live in this linear construct of time. So you kind of have to suspend that disbelief and think of a space that's outside of time. And that's very difficult to conceptualize. It's very difficult to do. I've seen a lot of documentaries and videos and all kinds of things that attempt to do this. But for me, what resonated probably the best, and this was a Hollywood interpretation, but was the movie Interstellar. We've touched on it a couple times on the channel before. But towards the end, when he is in a space, I would probably think of it more like a field of unlimited potential. So when linear space, linear time ceases to exist and you transcend that to, let's just say, a higher dimension, then you basically are living in the past, present, and the future all simultaneously. And, I don't want to spoil the end of that movie, but part of the reason he's able to communicate at the exact right moment, at the exact right place, with the exact right person, and a purposeful, intentional, exact message gave him access. And so presumably this was all Akashic. And to me, it was a very good representation of the conception of this infinite hallways of thought and potential and reality. So all dimensions literally exist in the same time and place, but they're just out of phase, and or our observation of such locks us into this plane for a period of time. Now, some people are blinded, some people awaken up or become enlightened or achieve nirvana. I'm not sure how that, well, I suppose as you climb up the Akashic dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that fits with a lot of religions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about a Cartesian, the Cartesian reality, coordinates spanning, distance, time, what limits our reality. And when we're born into this body, and I think most people, I don't know, I'm not going to conjecture, but I think a lot of people are stuck in Cartesian reality for most of the time, but definitely mystics and of all the major religions, and even in the shamanistic sense, are able to have people, in a practice, and respect that practice of people who are able to access the spiritual outside of the body, being out of our corporeal sense in a way to connect with whatever we want to call that in human terms, that energy or the source.
Source. I think people in the Akashic world would call it source, which I loosely understand as God or a supreme consciousness that's, behind the birth of not only this universe, but all universes. again, we've got a tiny little brain that we're trying to understand this, and it helps to conceptualize and break things down. I'm teaching my daughters about, math and geometry in school. And one of the things that came up is the concept of, one dimension being a single point, and then two dimension being a flat piece of paper. And I think it was Carl Sagan that got famous for talking about the flatlanders, and an ant walking on a two-dimensional plane, never looking up, never looking down, is only going to see a two-dimensional world. So a three-dimensional object that enters his world will cast a shadow, a two-dimensional shadow. And I saw a really great YouTube video, some high school kid explaining the concept of higher dimensions, and it was really, really great. I wish I'd have written his name down, but you'll look for that if you want more understanding about the expansion of dimensions, because this is very precise. This is very mathematical. And, Einstein always said, God doesn't play dice and speaks in the language of mathematics. The mathematics check out when you go from one dimension, two dimension, up to three dimensions. We've talked on this show that maybe the fourth dimensional beings are casting a three-dimensional shadow in our space that our three-dimensional being can therefore integrate with, interpret, observe, try to interact with, and so on and so forth. The interesting thing is the math will continue to check out until you hit 11 dimensions. So most of all physics and modern physicists and mystics alike agree there are 11 dimensions, spatial dimensions that we're talking about. And these infinite number of probability curves basically are thought and our free will collapse or lock in these higher dimensions and bring them down to a tangible plane. So we're using a three-dimensional object to sample the universe. We can understand three dimensions. We can understand better two dimensions, and we can really understand one dimension. Well, we can kind of understand the fourth dimension, and we can certainly extrapolate. And that's the part that we're leaving out today, because there's a lot the Akashic model has been very well mapped out in terms of what goes on at the fourth dimension, what goes on at the fifth dimension, what goes on in the sixth dimension. That bends my brain. So I didn't want to snap too many brains out there. We've been getting more feedback like, hey, dumb it down. And I'm thinking, we're just shouting into the cyberspace. It's good to know people are giving that feedback. But
absolutely. I think it'd take a lot of meditating on, a lot of reading on, to fully understand much after the fourth dimension. That was exactly my experience. So I invite everyone to do it, but with some understanding that you may be like, whoa, I need to let that marinate.
Well, and if it was intuitive, I think everyone would, one, be aware of it, and two, want to access it, in terms of, who wouldn't want an unlimited access to knowledge and inspiration and intuition and history. All of the great figures, whether we're talking about Edgar Cayce or Nostradamus or Tesla, they all were touching on this. This was all sort of part of their premise that there are these higher states of being, that our brain is essentially a transceiver in the third dimension, and it's designed to interact with third dimension. It can understand dimensional shadows beneath it, and it can project to higher, more complex. And like you said, past the fourth, it gets a little bit more detailed. To me, it makes sense. It resonates. It checks out. It's just, it was too much to include in this video, because understanding what it is important, but how to access it's the other piece, because we can lower, or raise our vibration based on our thought, based on intention, based on learning how to meditate, calm the monkey mind. enter sort of higher dimensional, less constrained realities,
Right.
so that you can better understand that shadow casting into this plane, into this reality, into this dimensional space.
It's almost like a state of mindfulness, right? Just being completely present and neutral, or having a positive energy, right? But all that negative energy and thinking in the past or in the future kind of loops you back into, like we've talked about before, the monkey brain, and being in these thought loops and being sort of trapped. So that energy is what really contains us in the third dimension, or maybe even the first dimension.
100. That's a really good point. 100%. And I think that's part of why maybe 10,000 years ago, with so much less distraction, they were so much closer to these higher planes, or they had a different energetic understanding, or even the Egyptians thought, the heart was the seat of the soul. Energetically, the Akashic information is thought to come through the heart chakra,
right,
and then sort of feed the crown and the brain and that organism. But
so if the heart's not open, if the heart's closed off, you're not getting any of that information.
We definitely have closed ourselves off, certainly in the last 2,000 years. But if we just look at the last 100 years and the explosion of technology and the social construct of our civilization and population growth and pollution and on and on and on, all of those worries exist in this third dimensional space, tie us here, ground us, lock us here. And if we truly are more of a being than what you and I see each other as in this consensus reality, then boy, we're really cutting ourselves off from our true nature, from true divine inspiration, and accessing that is kind of the goal of anyone who has a spiritual practice or meditates or prays, who's thinking of a power greater than themselves or beyond themselves or outside themselves, or a higher self that loves, protects, guides them, kind of thing.
Yeah. I was thinking while you were talking about just the fact that, I'm just throwing this out there, but are we manifesting our own destiny? Is this the path we need to go on as humanity to get to whatever is on the other end of the wormhole? But entering, I think, the Akashic space, or at least attempting to through all the practices you've talked about that we both teach our patients and people we work with, and ourselves. I'm a student of this, mindfulness and meditation and being present and tapping into something that's higher, that's not just what's, stimulus response, what's exactly in front of us, what we feel like we need to biologically respond to, interpret, or understand. And to get into this space and start to, change how we are in this world, and what impact individually we can have, through the butterfly effect, and through, how that folds through, how those waves fold through, and people experience different energy levels.
Yeah, wow, that was pretty. I got a script, man, and I don't even have anything that good. That was beautiful. I mean, that's I think what fascinates me about the Akashic record is, if you're believing in higher states of consciousness, if you're intending to access them, and if you're practicing spiritually, removing the limitations of yourself. Now, what does that mean? That means the worries of your day, right? The stress and the clutter of your mind and your thoughts, attitudes, preconceived notions, judgments, deeper emotions, self-criticism. Oh, I can't shut up my monkey mind. Reacting versus passively watching clouds go by or leaves drift by on a stream, like as your thoughts come and go and continue to settle down. That's why they call it a spiritual practice, right? Is learning how to raise that vibration, first by shedding the three-dimensional weight of the mortal coil and our egocentric problems, and I'm a man, and I got glasses and a beard and I'm a father and a husband and a doctor, and all of that doesn't
Right.
exist
Right.
outside of this time and space that we've rounded in and smashed a probability curve into a quite arguable consensus reality. Now, that being said, you can turn on the news and realize any event is going to have, an infinite number of perceptions, like, from all the people that observe it. So it makes you think about the objectivity of reality. But the point is the direction of thought and intention, and this vibrational matching or shedding of lower vibrational distractions, I would think of them, but they're really grounding you into that 3D space, learning how to shut that down and access, let in, turn on higher frequency, higher vibration, resonance. It's what spiritual alignment is, really. That's exactly what
Right.
we're aligning, is the energy.
How do you tune the transceiver to best receive that station, that dial, that 88 point whatever, 95.6? Like, can you amplify that, right? Because I certainly think innately every human, whatever you want to, has the ability to do it.
Yeah,
right?
by its very nature of existence, it should and has to
Yeah.
have access to it. Otherwise, you'd be, I don't know, a disembodied soul, a lost soul, born without a soul. I'm not really sure. I didn't prepare that thought. But no, it's a good point. It's a good point that really intention. I miss Wayne Dyer. I didn't know that he died. He died a fairly long time ago, maybe in like 2015. He's the guy that wrote the books, The Power of Now, or no, not Power of Now, Power of Intention, Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now. And he talked a lot about intention. And I think intention is very powerful because it draws on a universal manifesting principle, a universal creative energy,
right?
Which, like you said, we all have access to. We all have the ability to set an intention, remove doubt, focus. One of my favorite lines from Caddyshack is, see your future, be your future, make your future, Danny. And that's the same.
I got to rewatch that film.
Yeah, I mean, that's really.
I think it absolutely is. And I think in a comedic sense, it's genius as well. It's what I see, what you just explained, Mark, so eloquently is what I see when people come in and get better, right? When I do therapy with people, I tell them about the space. We're holding space. I'm holding space here. You're manifesting through your intention and your focus, and this energy. That's what's healing you.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I believe. I'm not doing anything magical. I have no magical powers. These medicines that we prescribe to people maybe help control some of these overwhelming things that keep us in the 3D world, right? These ruminated thought patterns.
You're giving them a lot of credit, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, they can help. They can help to a degree. Maybe it's the intention. How much of it is the intention of this thing's going to help me, right? This is a placebo effect. We talked about this last time, but how much of it is really that, and how much of it is the drug? I think that's where your skepticism maybe was coming from, because I'm in the same seat. Sometimes I don't know, but if I'm not doing harm, first do no harm, and this is helping their intention, this is helping the energy that they're bringing into the room, that they're creating and manifesting. It's a ratio of risk to benefit, but I'll do it. And that's pretty much why. But we have this inner healing intelligence, this inner healing wisdom that we have access to. This is Stan Grof's philosophy, and he has written a little bit about the Akashic records, but so it's all within us. And I know that sounds completely cheesy, but the difficulty is how do you get there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I could see how some people would think it's cheesy. But you made a really good point about the drugs, that they're three-dimensional, meaning they exist in this plane. They're three-dimensional tools to manipulate a three-dimensional biology and arguably are doing its work in this plane, in this space. But your intention to heal far transcends that. It's not even comparing apples to oranges, right? And it's really, I think it's brilliant to bring in the placebo effect, because that's something we've done a whole show on, and dovetails very nicely with this concept of Akashic records, intentions, making your desires in alignment with your thoughts. And that's where it begins. And by the way, actually, no, it could even begin further back. It could begin with, let me just observe what this 3-pound piece of goo is doing. And just observing it is a lesson in your own humanity, really, because we're not always present with ourselves. We're not always present with the moment. We're not always holding space for others. And we're not always in our best wise mind.
Absolutely.
But we always have a choice over our attitude, kind of a Viktor Frankl lesson. And that is where it begins. The thought, the belief, maybe it's faith. Maybe this is just another, a faith
Right.
like a religion.
We don't have control of the experience that we, the emotions that we feel, and what we experience viscerally, maybe to most of the extent, but what we make of it, right, is exactly what you're saying. What we attach to it, the meaning and labels we attach to it, is what can free us. Like in Viktor Frankl's case, right? I mean, he survived the concentration camps, the worst of humanity, experienced a horribly spiritually degrading, experience, but wrote, one of the most, I encourage everyone to go back and read A Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, just one of the most profound pieces of nonfiction, mixed with the logotherapy, which is the type of psychotherapy he invented. And just such a, journey that you go through, and just to watch him, like you said, just this is where I'm going with this. I could have gone and totally, imploded.
Well, I mean, to answer your question, I think there's 10,000 different ways, and even spiritual teachers all have different means and mechanisms. And I think it's really important, that the undiscovered self, why can't I remember this? The undiscovered life is not worth living. Unexamined life is not worth living, kind of thing. If you approach your own life with that intention and that perception and that reality, then you're going to pay attention to what's going on inside of you. And I think it starts with removing negative thinking, remove your myopic, oh my gosh, this is my life, this is my crisis in the moment, this is my eternity. This too shall pass, dust in the wind, in 100 years, who's going to care? We're spinning around at 66,000 miles per hour, hurtling through time and space, tethered to a burning sphere by a unfathomable force in an unlimited universe. It's a little overwhelming. People just want to do their TikTok, or they just want to come home after work and Al Bundy it. What helps one person transcend is going to be different for another. Someone like Dr. Schulman, for instance, I was always amazed at the power of music and vibration to have such a profound effect. And I think it does on all of us, but that might be more his flavor. Whereas Mother Teresa, it might be different. Gandhi, it might be different. Certainly someone, I don't like naming negative things, but think of negative leaders throughout history and how they've stunted that awakening, that expression, that self-discovery, that growth. When we live in fear, we can't it's one of the greatest attenuators. Fear and anger, I think, are the greatest attenuators of a higher vibrational state. And they will keep you locked down. They will keep you locked in, and they will cloud even your three-dimensional world. Right.
I mean, I think there's, it's a lived experience to understand and live in those states and feel like this is my natural place. This is where I want to be. And I think people get that. And I think the mystics put it into words that we can understand, and teachings of how we get back there and how we could stay there. But I think you have to accept that as a general precept to want to move higher, and you can get there through, intense religious experience,
Sure.
spontaneously, meditation, holotropic breath work, fasting, music, dancing, psychedelic states,
looking at a flower or into the eyes of a child. Yeah. So I would say for most people, there are some practices that work almost universally. All humans breathe, and breath is such an incredible grounding focus of meditation. And it dovetails very well with meditation, that I think meditation is probably one of the most universal tools in helping advance or raise you to that higher vibrational alignment, with access to far greater, essentially infinite wisdom. So, and then there's 11 stages. It's sort of like the Dante's and circles of hell, except we're talking about the Akashic circles of heaven.
Yeah, well, I mean, the hell's in there too.
And it's integrated, sure.
Right. And to go through a hell experience or a suffering experience is gives you the contrast of what it feels to feel love and good and accepted and safe, and as crappy as that sounds, and at least in the human existence, that's how we discover it. It's through that dichotomy, that yin yang, that the opposite.
I'm surprised we made it this far without talking about The Matrix, because The Matrix was one of the greatest, earliest, most memorable movies to deal with some really difficult concepts that I think are hard to even illustrate, much less present in any story-like way when you got 2 hours to learn it in. And I think it's one of the reasons why that movie was so successful. But the main reason was it was dealing with these higher planes of existence. And one of the things that he says, it's probably the scene with the woman in the red dress about removing doubt. The reason why Neo was the only one was because he was the only one who truly understood the suspension of disbelief, the removing of the doubt, understanding there is no spoon, right? He was the only one that could get it. It was so easy, we'd all get it. And perhaps when we get it, we reincarnate in a different universe or a different position within our own life. Maybe I'll redo it next time as my wife, or as my child, or as someone I've wronged, or as somebody that I need to heal and nurture. Maybe I'm on another planet and another eon. That part, I don't know that the Akashic determines necessarily, because here's where the power of free will and intention come in. And I think what people don't like the concept of, okay, soul contracts, reincarnation. All right, I'm with you on that. So I choose to come to this life, and I choose to be a male, and I choose to marry this person, and I choose to have this many kids, and I choose this profession. I think of it as the soul contract as an outline. Do you have to do those things? No, but that's what you wanted to do. And that's what your intention was. Whether you get lost in it because you get corrupt or greedy, or I don't know, whatever gets you off the track is kind of irrelevant, because if you don't get it this lifetime, it'll come up in a different time, place, different evolution of your spirit. But if you do hit these main markers, the high points, like, well, make sure he meets this person, because all of the soul lessons are going to have to be, mirrored off of this person, or make sure they go through this trauma. People don't like that idea of this almost like Catholic predestination. And those are sort of like make a plan, God laughs type of thing. You come down to Earth School and you come to play it out. You feel drawn to those things, and you feel repelled by other things that don't resonate with your soul's desire for its lessons. But the free will remains. So I could choose to be born and sit on my butt and never do any of it. I could choose that. What am I proving? Who am I proving it to? Who am I sticking it to? We don't have to do these things. We're going to continue to evolve. We're going to continue to gain life lessons and dare I say wisdom through hardship or success. But if people truly understood the power that they have to create and shape their own world, we would all have a completely different daily routine. We wouldn't wake up and turn over and check our Twitter feed or whatever. I don't do any social media, so I sound like an idiot when I try to talk about it. But maybe if the first thing that you did in the morning was get into that wise mind and 15 minutes of meditation and set the intention and focus on removing that doubt and disbelief and the daily spiritual practice, which includes brain training, and someone like Nicole, who can help through the neuroplasticity and neurofeedback, right, and even biofeedback on the mind control aspect of it, and you get better at meditating. You can get to these states faster. You learn more about yourself. The exam in life is worth living because you find out, like, hey, music is what does it for me. I think our show that we did on psychedelics shows that the transceiver can be interfered with by three-dimensional tools. And when that's interfered, what happens? We get a glimpse of what's beyond our normal construct assembly of awareness, reality, consensus reality. We might uncover lost memories or repressed memories. We might have a premonition or a sense of intuition or a calling, right? How do you explain people being drawn to certain areas of the globe or drawn, after a near-death experience, they quit their jobs and they come do something completely different. They've connected with a part of themselves that is greater than what they thought they knew.
Right.
Matter of fact, just writing the show, I got a little bit of that. It raised my vibration. So you're saying, like, what can you do? Well, talk about it, practice it, have a spiritual teacher, do a podcast.
Do a podcast. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the intention here for me too is setting this framework up for approaching. I've gone through phases where I've had a daily practice, and it's difficult to do. And I think we as healers in this field need to experience these things so that we can teach them. Everybody can teach it. Everybody can learn it and experience it. But this definitely got me in tune to continuing to think about, how do I manifest that? How do I get to this next energetic level? So I can be more at peace, right? Maybe that's my little third dimensional egocentric desire, but I think it's a pretty healthy, balanced one. I think most people share that, to want to be more at peace, but it's really, it's really through being whole here that we can, move towards other levels. So I think it's, working on that transceiver, getting out the hammer and banging on it. It's a muscle. It's something you have to flex, using breathing techniques throughout the day, grounding yourself through meditation and through some form of spiritual practice. And that's a conclusion I'm starting to come to more and more, that's sort of pretty core to healing.
I think of like those Tibetan singing bowls, right? Most people, if they have no experience or knowledge what they are, one, they're going to pick it up and it'd be like Planet of the Apes. Like, okay, what is this thing? Like, can I eat out of it or whatever? Then there's people out there that identify this thing and say, oh, that's a Tibetan singing bowl. And, you're supposed to do something with the thing. And they're trying to do it and it doesn't even make a noise. And they're like, this thing's warped, right? Then you get someone else who has had experience with it before, right? And knows the right touch, knows the right way to enter that space and the right speed to move it and to start the resonance. And the better you get at it, the faster you can get to the resonance, the more intense and powerful you can get to the resonance, the longer it can echo and reverberate. And then you can come back and give it, like you said, a little touch up and tune throughout the day. I kind of think of our energy and vibration, these almost pejorative terms to represent our spiritual alignment. I kind of think of it almost like a Tibetan singing bowl. So anything, you will know when the thing starts singing, you will feel it. And the best place for anybody to start, since we're all talking, our target audience is humans here. If any aliens are listening, feel free to try this at home too, or in your local galaxy, super galactic group, super cluster, whatever.
And like and subscribe.
Yeah, make sure you like and subscribe and click this flip over there. No, but you brain training is part of it. Mind control is part of it. Spiritual daily practice is part of it. Meditation focuses your intuition, the reception of higher knowledge. The harder we try to fight it, it's almost like a psychic quicksand. When we let go, or a Chinese finger trap, is when we can release the blocks and let the wisdom, energy, intuition, insight flow in. As that occurs, there's a dissolution of our ego, our identity, our responsibility, our sense of time, our perspective, our attitudes, pretty much everything we identify as us. So it's this journey into another you, a higher you, a more wise you, a plug into a higher source, all of the above, that exists when you settle into that space between thoughts, right? And you remain open to information, you remain receptive, you set the intention of a wise mind, you demand, we talked about lucid dreaming. One of the tools that works quite well in lucid dreaming, and I've got a lot of experience with that, is demanding clarity now. So if you're in a lucid dream and things start to get a little fuzzy and stressed and derealized, sound familiar? like our daily life, you can demand intention, clarity now. Well, who are you talking to? Number one. Number two, why do you get it? Because you do get it. You get it within the lucid dream. You get clarity. That would be like me saying right now, after, I don't know, an infection with a global virus, brain fog, be gone now, and it would instantly lift.
Right.
Because when we're at these higher energetic planes, we're more powerful. We have more exertion and influence over lower dimensional spaces. So the whole point of all of this is to get people to set their intentions, since we know as above, so below.
Yeah, I mean, you're experiencing a place that also may not, we're talking about the unconscious. I'm talking about the unconscious now, that may not speak to you in a language that you readily understand, just because, again, the limitations of our mind, and we may be shown things, archetypally through a hero's journey, through death and rebirth, through fusion experiences with other energetic levels. And some of that's ineffable, some of that's just experienced and allows you to further sort of grow and be in that space, in a deeper and deeper level. But without practice, we're stuck. We're stuck inside the nutshell of our skull.
And most of us will remain there and live out this life. And maybe that's what we're supposed to do. Maybe we're not supposed to spiritual universal hack these higher planes of existence. The reason why I don't think that's the case is because and maybe this is a utopian view of existence, but I believe that, a lot of religions would say, well, God is love and acceptance and forgiveness and all these altruistic things. That would have to exist. That would have to be true if the whole premise of the Akashic vibrations, positivity, energy, almost like the Bohr model of the atom and electron valence shells or something like that. We're constantly able to expand that. But more we shrink it, there are lessons that can be learned within that dimension and with that space. Maybe it's one dimensional, maybe it's 11 dimensionals, but everything in between is mathematically sound, spiritually sound, and ultimately where the universe that possibly created itself to just experience itself, observe itself, create existence, to understand itself, to entertain itself, who knows? But the purpose of that was of the highest vibrational frequency. So there is a universal desire, goal, trend towards love, and these higher vibrational things, which are directly in opposition with physical three-dimensional concepts, like the concept of entropy. Entropy basically would say, no, love would die out, nothing's permanent, it's all going to rot away, and find the lowest energy state.
I think of hope when you say that, right? I think of hope. That's what comes to mind, is following that energy level that we, that you will, if you work hard enough at it, you'll get to that space. You may not be completely free from pain and suffering, because that's part of the human experience, but you will definitely get to a point where you can look back at it, the observing self, and go, oh, I'm not gonna continue to focus all of my five senses on this. I'm gonna allow myself to leave this from time to time when possible, under the limitations of our bodies, to live the highest vibration. And so I think that's an incredibly nice summary and a beautiful concept, this Akashic Records. I was surprised, just how we've pulled this together.
I fly by the seat of my pants. That's how I roll. But I challenge you, the viewer, to think about this, to observe your mind, and to make the intention, set the intention on self-discovery through a lot of the tools that we talked about, and the principles and the understanding and the belief and the removing of the doubt, all of it, and see what happens. Notice the synchronicities that start in your life. Notice the gifts. Notice the perspective change. Notice the change in your feeling. Vibration and frequency are kind of the best words that we have for it, but that's what this channel is about, and that's what Dr. Sean Paul and I are about, and that's the future, I think, of our civilization and our species, is to take that to the next level of awareness. So we're not, living in the flat plane like the ants walking across the proverbial page.
That's right.
The three-dimensional page of this existence.
There's something beyond our normal, Jesus shouldn't say normal, but our day-to-day existence that's so much deeper. And so awesome.
Well, Dr. Sean Paul, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It was awesome.
We'll do it again next time. We'll tackle world hunger.
Sounds good.
We'll get that taken care of. Until then, be well.
Be well.